Intersect Illinois is one of our great partners, and Dan has been there for a couple of years now. Intersect Illinois, think of them in some ways as the GPEDC for the state of Illinois. They are the marketing arm for economic development for the state of Illinois. And I've had a pleasure of working with Dan for a couple of years now. He even took our good friend Lenora Fisher, who's there on the line, as one of his staff people. So we always said if we were going to lose Lenora, we'd rather lose her to an ally and a partner of ours. Dan, they refer to themselves as the public-private partnership focused on business attraction and job creation for the state of Illinois. During Dan's tenure, Intersect has helped bring Illinois 1,400 jobs and $1 billion in investment each year. Prior to leading Intersect, Dan led teams at GE Real Estate, T-Mobile, and the American Medical Association. He also served as the assistant director of the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So he's had both sides now of the economic development on the state side and on the private side. He was the winner of a presidential management fellowship and served as an adjunct professor at Northwestern University. He has an MBA from the Booth School of Business at the University of Chicago and a master's in international economics from the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins. And he lives there in Chicago with his wife and 3 daughters. I have 2 daughters, so God bless you for having 3. So I've asked Dan to do is just give an overview of Intersect. Like I said, they're one of our really great partners, and I thought it'd be a good way of kind of level setting, what we're doing here in the greater Peoria area. And how that relates to what Dan and his team and the team at DCEO is doing at the state level. So Dan, you should have control so that you can share your screen. I know you have some slides to share with folks as well. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Sorry that I couldn't be there with you in person. I think, as Chris said, you want to be better safe than sorry. So I'm glad that we can still connect virtually this morning. I also can't get started without saying a word about Chris. I've been to Peoria as much, if not more, than most locations in Illinois, and it's because Chris has a very active and aggressive program for economic development. I think if you were to go around the state, you're not going to find a more thoughtful, an insightful guy in terms of economic development for the state. And so, Chris, I want to thank you for your leadership, not just for Greater Peoria, but for Illinois. You really are an asset for all of us. And so I've been happy to partner with you. What I would like to talk about today is certainly some of what we do, but really about why businesses come here and why they don't. And maybe I'll start with a fellow named Manesh Ochoteco, who is a Spaniard. He comes from Spain, and he got this plum assignment. He was asked to launch the Spanish business in the US. And so he was trying to figure out where to do it. He opened up the map. He looked at the center of the country and saw Illinois. There were direct flights here. And so he decided to come to Illinois. And so he came here, he put out his sign, he hired his team, got his space, and he went to work. And there was a lot of interest in his product. He's in machine tooling, so there were a lot of folks who wanted to check out his product, and he made a pretty good one. And so he started picking up customers from across the state. Eventually, he started getting more customers from across the Midwest, the East Coast and the West Coast, even the South. All of them started coming in. He was running a good business. And when that happens, something else starts to happen. He starts to get a lot of calls. In this case, these were calls from other states who were saying, hey, what are you doing in Illinois? To move your business to my state. And here, Texas was the most aggressive. Why don't you come down to Texas? We got low taxes. We got cheap labor. Why don't you come on down? And so this is partly what I want to talk about today. So let me share my screen. question he had was, why should we have Illinois, right? Why should I stay here? And so he thought about it. He reads the papers just like you do. And he's like, hey, I'm a businessman, low taxes, cheap labor. Why would I say no to that? And if we were in person, I would actually talk to you and sort of survey the room here and let's figure out what you think he did. But instead, I'm just going to tell you. He decided that he was going to leave Illinois. He moved down to Houston, set up in the suburbs there where he had a customer. He says, I'm going to get myself these low taxes and this cheap labor. And it was good at first, right? The customer kept his business afloat, but things weren't as good as he thought. In fact, what he saw was that his taxes weren't as low as advertised. They tax manufacturing equipment in Texas. We don't do that here in Illinois. So he didn't see this big gap that he thought he would see. But the thing that killed him in the long run was the labor. It was cheap, and he got what he paid for. He had to spend a lot of money on training and retraining and then training them again so that they could produce the same quality product that he was producing in Illinois. And it was driving his costs up so much that ultimately he said, maybe I need to get out of Texas. So he had to figure out where to go. I mean, there was Illinois, which he already knew, but Indiana and Wisconsin and Michigan were all making competing offers and offering lots of incentives. Why don't you come and do business here? It was really a replay of what he heard back in Texas. So he had a decision to make, but when he looked at the facts and really started to think about what he wanted to do, he decided to come back to Illinois. And the case that he made was that the manufacturing talent here was just better than anywhere else he could go. So he moved back from Texas and located here. So I share this story because I think it captures a lot of the opportunities and a lot of the obstacles that we have here in Illinois. We have all of these great assets in our state, but I don't think we do a very good job of talking about them. Quite the opposite. I think the narrative that we have in our state now is really a negative one, right? I will talk to people who say, hey, my community is going great, but the rest of the state's going to pot. I had a neighbor, actually, he said, hey, how's your new job? I said, oh, it's going great. He says, what is it again? I said, I recruit businesses to come to Illinois. He said, and I want to get the line exactly right. He said, yeesh, that's got to be a tough gig. So what makes you think so? I mean, you're from Indiana, you're here. He's like, yeah, I know, but I read about what it's like. So, well, how's business for you? He says, oh, my business is going great. How about your wife's business? Oh, yeah, she's loving it, having a great time. What about the kids? Where do they go to school again? Oh, U of I, they love it. Okay, so what's the problem, right? And this is this dynamic that we see going on over and over again. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a debate or a conversation about how to make things even better. That's what you do in a democracy. That's healthy. But when we focus so much on what is wrong with Illinois that we forget what is right with Illinois, then I think we've gone too far. And I think we start to do damage to our business environment. And we literally talk prospective businesses out of coming here. And I'll tell you what I mean. The criticisms that we share here, that we talk about, are just taken by other states and are used to talk about why other businesses shouldn't come here. Sort of like when I was a kid, we used to say that I can talk about my mama, but you can't talk about my mama. It's the same dynamic. I don't like other states trying to talk about us, and particularly when they're using our talking points. So what I want to do today is give you some of the facts about Illinois so that you can help make the case and help tell our story. So let's start at the top. The #1 state in the Midwest for business creation is Illinois. We are the #2 state in the country for corporate expansions and relocations, not according to me, but according to Site Selection magazine. We're also the #2 state for infrastructure and for education. We have the 5th largest GDP in the nation at $1 trillion. There are only 5 states who've surpassed $1 trillion. You cannot do that by accident. In fact, if we were a country, we would have one of the largest economies in the world. We'd be a member of the G20. That is a big deal. And again, not a fluke. There's good reasons for that. And so I want to get into it. Look at the businesses that are here. We are a global headquarters hub, from ADM to Allstate, from McDonald's to Motorola. It is not only a huge economy, it is a hugely diverse economy. We are leaders in multiple fields, and that gives us a tremendous amount of resilience when it comes to our economy. And it's not just the big guys who are here. We're seeing a lot of activity and growth on the startup side and the small business side. We got a top 5 ranking from Inc. magazine for being one of the top 5 states for small business. Chicago was on fire in 2022 with venture capital investment. But it's the universities that have been really great for churning out startups. We see that a lot with the University of Illinois, which has become recognized worldwide for their ability to turn out companies. And that's also wonderful. So you've got big companies and you've got small companies, they're all making their home in Illinois. Question is why? What are our competitive advantages? I'm going to suggest to you that there are 2 major ones that cross most of the industries that are here. Here's the first one. We have a highly skilled workforce. Look at our universities. University of Illinois alone graduates more engineers every year than MIT, Stanford, and Caltech combined. That is a remarkable feat. And that's a huge advantage if you are looking to hire a pipeline of talent, right? It's so hard to find good employees, as I mentioned with that story at the top. Having a university system that is churning out talent is a big deal. And of course, it's not just the University of Illinois. 3 million Illinoisans have a bachelor's degree or higher. We've got the great business schools. We've got the great research universities. It's all right here in Illinois. And it's also not all at the university level. The community college system, we have the 3rd largest community college system in the country. Tremendous asset. They specialize in taking a student with no skills, meeting with the local employers, and then training up on practical skills in a relatively short amount of time. You can go see classes that are being held right off the factory floor. You see places like Heartland, which has a dedicated EV training program. This is a huge advantage for us because what we're finding is that as technology evolves and manufacturing processes evolve, you need to have that place where you can go back to school to sort of upskill yourself. And our community college system does a fantastic job of that. Huge advantage for us. So the workforce is one key advantage. Here's the second one. We are at a strategic location in the center of the nation's infrastructure. This is a big deal. Everyone knows O'Hare Airport, still the #1 internationally connected airport in the world, the most connected airport in the world. We also are the only state where all of the Class 1 rails meet, and they meet in 2 different locations in Illinois. Huge advantage. The broadband fiber runs along the rail system, so we're a major hub for broadband. And then the inland ports and the 3rd largest highway make it really easy to move product, whether you're moving it over to the Mississippi and down out to the Gulf or out and across the country. So huge advantages here for any company that has a product that they need to move or people that they need to move up and out and across the world. And here's just a simple example of that. Starting from Illinois, you can see what you can cover in a day or 2-day or even a 3-day drive. This is a big deal, and this is a big advantage for business. And that's one of the reasons why our economy is so attractive. A third reason, and this is sort of a nice bonus, it really comes from the first two, is it brings the world to Illinois. Over 2,000 companies from overseas who've set up their offices here in Illinois. That adds up to hundreds of thousands of jobs for Illinoisans, and of course, hundreds of billions of dollars in investment here in Illinois. What I like about this is it says a lot about who we are as a community, that we can welcome so many different cultures into Illinois, where we can coordinate and collaborate and grow together. I mean, 80 consul generals are based out of Illinois. It is huge, and it's a place that no other state in the Midwest can claim to. So it's a big advantage for us as well internationally, and one of the things that makes us different. So at Intersect, what we do is we focus on marketing and sales to bring new business into the state, and we focus on the areas where Illinois is most competitive. So I want to walk through these quickly so you've got a flavor of them. I don't think they'll be a big surprise, but maybe there'll be some items here that you didn't know about. And I'll start with manufacturing. Advanced manufacturing is still one of our best industries. We have the fourth highest manufacturing economy in the country, fifth in the nation for R&D. But our bread and butter here is that pipeline of talent. We are continuing to churn out those students so that manufacturers can find the talent they need. And that's a big advantage for us versus other states who just don't have that university system. Closely related to manufacturing is the energy and EV space. And this space is just exploding, certainly with electric vehicles. I think everybody there knows about Rivian. Lion Electric and Goshen are big as well. EV box are huge. What brings them here, though, is that supply chain. Over 1,800 companies are already in Illinois. That is a deep supply chain. And the incentives that we have here are some of the best in the country. We're getting comments from other states about how competitive we are and how from site selection consultants about how this is now a destination for a lot of these companies. And that's a big advantage for us. And again, having that workforce with the manufacturing skills, and particularly with skills about how to be more efficient, those are really attractive to companies as well. Argonne, being a center for battery research, also makes us hugely attractive for companies who are thinking long term. Next industry is agribusiness, and this should come as no surprise. Agribusiness last year was the #1 source in central Illinois for business expansions and relocations. Certainly you have companies like ADM and Primient and ConAgra who are driving things forward here, but the industry is spawning additional industries. So, the most obvious one is food, where we're #1 in private food R&D, and we're turning out the #1 source for master's students in food science. But you're also seeing industrial fermentation take off. That is a huge opportunity that you're going to hear more about. That in turn is creating things like sustainable aviation fuel that will create lots of jobs in the future. We're also seeing innovative companies like Upside Foods, which is creating protein in the lab. They're growing chicken and lobster from stem cells, which is crazy. I didn't know that you could do that, but they think it's going to be the next big thing. And they've decided that they want to be here in Illinois, a hugely innovative company, the only one, by the way, or excuse me, the first one to get FDA approval. And again, they're doing that not just because of the quality of our soil, but also because of the quality of our workforce. And of course, if you're at the center of the country, your logistics is going to be good. And we are. We continue to be rated highly for our logistics workforce and our location. And this is just a force magnifier. I was talking to a consultant from CBRE, and he was telling me that the average company spends 9% of their revenue on logistics, on just moving their products out to their customers. So when you can be in a more cost-effective location, it is like a built-in cost savings when you can have a better logistics system. So we take advantage of that too, and the companies who are here lean into that heavily. And of course, you got to talk about life sciences. You have OSF right there in Peoria. They are fantastic in their push to drive life sciences, and they're not alone. The state just won the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. That's a $250 million prize from the Facebook founder and his spouse. And the idea was they only wanted this $250 million to go to a place where you could have multiple universities collaborating to focus on new breakthrough research. And so we were competing with both coasts, but we put together a better application and we won. And so that money is going to drive a lot of R&D, which is in turn going to create innovation and ultimately companies. So we're very happy to have won that nationwide competition. But look, 14,000 life sciences companies, that's huge. If you were to go back 10 or 15 years, you'd see we were ranked probably 10 or 15th in the country in life sciences, but we've been steadily moving forward. We're typically considered around fifth to eighth now, depending on who you go by. But basically, our value proposition is you get this world-class community at a fraction of the cost because we're just not as pricey as places on either coast, but yet we have a similar kind of talent pool. And that gives us a huge advantage there. And finally, our tech and IT sector are massive. That is a photo of Aurora, the fastest computer in the world, which sits at Argonne Labs here in Illinois. But what we're seeing is a number of areas that are taking off. FinTech has been growing for years, but right now, quantum is showing tremendous promise. Quantum computing is coming out of both our universities and these national labs, has the potential to change not just computing, but all of the industries that rely on computing. They're able to move geometrically faster than today's computing systems. And that has the opportunity to transform the economy. And so Chicago, and now really Illinois, can make a legitimate claim to being the leader in this space. This is where one of the tech hub designations has come in, right? We've got one for quantum in Chicago. We have another for industrial fermentation in central Illinois. These are big bets on the future where we think we have an opportunity to win. By the way, going back to being a fiber optic hub are coming in a big way. And of course, that pipeline of talent continues to be important because if you're going to come here, you need to find talent, and we've got it. So those are all competitive areas. And I think I saw my friend Cheryl on the line here. This is all underscored by reliable, affordable, sustainable energy. And our utility partners are a huge asset for our state. And so this is something that we push a lot, particularly as projects are getting bigger and more energy hungry. And, we don't talk about it enough, but we also happen to live in a great state. There are just, whether you're into cities or smaller towns or rural communities, it's just a fantastic place to live. I know looking out your window, you might say, are you sure, Dan? I'm telling you, most of the time, it's great here. I mean, from the world-class museums, the great restaurants, maybe with the exception of the Chicago Bears, we have world-class sports teams, but they're going to get better next year. You keep an eye on them. It's just a affordable, high quality cost of living that is really hard to come by, that trade-off of them. So Chris mentioned at the top that I've been at this role for 2 years now, 2 years and change. When I first got in, one of the things that I did was meet with site selection consultants to get their feedback on Illinois. And I remember talking to one fellow who said, and this guy, he's like a statesman in the industry. He's been doing it for 30 plus years. He said, I haven't brought a project to Illinois in 10 years or more. He says, I don't want to be rude to you, Dan, but your reputation precedes you. I just don't think that Illinois is ready. So I told him the same story that I pretty much just walked you through. I talked about our workforce. I talked about our location. I talked about our industries and how we're competitive, and said, hey, why don't you give me a look? And he said, well, I appreciate your earnestness, and I'll think about it. We got off the phone. Well, he called me back a few months later, and he said, hey, you said you wanted a look, you wanted a chance. So I got this project where frankly, we're in the final stages. We're looking somewhere in the Midwest, and we're kind of down. But if you want to, put your hat in the ring, you're welcome to. We only have a month or so left before we make our final call. So, I'm thinking, great, you're going to call me at the last minute to get in on a race that's almost over, but fine, I'll take the opportunity. And he sent me this description for a business. It was a roofing company, one of the big national players, and they needed a factory space. And so we sent out the RFI, we went through the whole state, and we found a good site in Peru, not too far from where many of you are sitting. And we put it in. We said, look, we think this could be a good spot for you. He looked at it, decided he would come out and see it. And long story short, he decided that it was a fantastic site. And they moved into Peru, North Peru to be exact. They invested $80 million. As you see here, it is one of the biggest projects that they have had in recent years. And it creates a lot of jobs there. So none of it would have happened if we hadn't been out there telling our story about why Illinois is a good place to be. And really, that's my message to you today. Make sure that you control your story about the greater Peoria area. The name Peoria has tremendous name recognition. People across the country have heard of it. What they don't know is what it's about, right? But so there's an opportunity to leverage, to define yourselves, and to really tell your story and not let anybody else tell it for you. I can't emphasize that enough. So I'm going to stop there. Chris, I don't know. I'll toss it back to you. If there's time for questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Sure. Well, first, thanks again, Dan. It's a great overview. And I would just two reflections that I'd love if Jen Ham's got a question at least. One, the very beginning of your, and kind of the way you ended it, it felt like we could have been in a Choose Greater Peoria meeting, those of you who are involved. And the same way Illinoisans sometimes badmouth Illinois, Peorians or Pecanites or we'll call them Greater Peorians, often badmouth ourselves, right? And so that's one of the parts of the initiative of the Choose Greater Peoria is that we need to recognize the positivity, not ignore the problems in our community, but recognize the values. So that kind of resonated with me that it's that's something that you're trying to do at the state level. The other part to me, and it is a constant struggle that we deal with here, is actually Scott Sorrell of the Peoria County was quoted as saying this, on WCBU yesterday, the importance of sites, of having available sites and buildings. We have handled between Lenora the first 3 quarters of the year and me the last quarter of the year 74 requests for information that have come from site selectors through almost all of them through Intersect. And sometimes we just, we probably submitted for half of them, a site for half of them. About half of those we might have, well, this isn't a good match, but we're not doing our job if we don't try. The other half of them, we simply said, we just don't have anything to match. And I think that's going to be a real important emphasis in the next couple of years to carry on some of the work that Lenora had done around identifying specifically industrial sites. We don't lack for commercial sites, but that's not kind of the way the game is played. If you're looking for office buildings, you're often, just using brokers, local real estate. Really what Dan does and what we do here is about industrial development, because that's where the site selectors tend to get picked up the most. So that's some work we have to do and to continue to do and continue to tell our story. And I think we've been doing a good job of that, but you can never tell your story too many times to too many people, because there's so much information in the world that just because they heard it once doesn't mean they'll remember it the next time. So we have to continue doing that. Jen, you had a question, and then anybody else? We have a couple of minutes here of Dan's time. So Jen, did you have a question?
I just wanted to thank you, Dan, for your time today. That information was very valuable, and I would love to be able to get my hands on some of those statistics and rankings. Information.
Dan, I'm sure you're happy if I share your PowerPoint with the folks here.
Absolutely, and I can maybe even give you a cleaned up one without the stories, unless you want those too. But yes, I'd be happy to get those out.
People know how to delete slides. I'll just say, we're going to make you do extra work.
Yes.
Does anybody else have questions for Dan?
Chris, it's Andy. I do.
Yeah.
Hi, Dan. Andy Hondiger, Morton Community Bank. Just so we know a little bit more about Intersect, can you give us an idea of the annual budget for Intersect, and also where the money comes from and how many employees you have, what kind of organizational structure you lead?
Interesting question. So we are a public-private partnership. So we receive funding from the state as well as from our board. So our board members are contributing dollars as well as the state. You said what? How big are we? We're probably about 20 people, including Lenora Fisher right there in Peoria. We focus most of our efforts outside of Illinois. So we don't do a lot of advertising in the state. We market to industries outside of Illinois, whether that's international or domestic. So that's pretty much who we are. We've been growing. We started off very small. The legislature sees us as a net tax revenue creator because we've been successful in bringing companies in. And so we've been seeing our budget increase. Now, I think the last report was in the neighborhood of $5 or $6 million.